Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm really excited to talk to you about this topic today. Do you ever have a really good idea, but you're in the middle of something or you're about to go to sleep and so you're like, oh, it's fine, I'll remember. I don't need to write this down right now. It's okay, I'll remember in the morning. And then that idea floats into the abyss and it never returns. Well, okay, this video is not one of those times. I have fallen asleep thinking about this idea for 3 nights in a row. But before we get into the video today, I first wanted to thank everyone for their really awesome comments on my last video. My last video did really well for me, for my YouTube channel. So I just want to thank everyone. If you're coming from that video, hey, thank you. Some people left really thought out comments. So I really appreciate that. And I want to say thank you to anyone who offered encouragement. So I don't want to talk too long about it, but thank you very much. I really appreciated it. Anyways, let's get into it. So I wanted to tell you guys, I have a 12 to 15 page paper due in about 2 weeks. I actually have a final presentation due tomorrow. Oh, but I kind of started on it, but basically I'm prioritizing this over that. That's not to say that it won't get done. It will get done. But I wanted to make sure I could film when there's a semblance of daylight. Sorry, it's a very dark day today. Okay, so now that I've talked about things other than the topic, let's get into the topic. How many times can I say topic? Take a shot every time I say topic. But the topic today is space. Ooh, I'm actually genuinely interested in the concept of space and time, I guess particularly time. But that's not the kind of space I'm talking about today. Today I'm talking about the physical space that you exist in around you, I guess. That's kind of vague, but I'll get into it more specifically. Like usual, there are a few different directions that this topic can be taken, I think. Take another shot. So the first way or direction I want to take this is New York apartment tours or New York apartments and reset vlogs, because that is one of the things that really prompted this idea in my head. I do want to say this isn't something new that's been on my page. It's just something that I've seen some recently that really got me thinking, I guess. And I want to say I actually I personally really enjoy them. That's why they're on my For You page. I think they're really fascinating and they're really interesting to watch, or almost soothing in a way. They can feel almost motivating. The New York apartments are the really expensive high rent apartments, and then the reset vlogs are people on the weekend who are their whole day is spent cleaning their apartments and making them really pretty. So I think these are both kind of inspiring in different ways, where they're promoting this ideal lifestyle where you kind of have your shit together and you're making enough money, or you come from enough money where you're able to afford these nice apartments. These apartments are insane. They're the things of dreams. They surpass dreams. I couldn't even imagine some of these apartments. They're bright, they're white in more ways than one usually, and they're really clean. Systemic racism. Anyways, I think apartment resets they have a similar vibe and they follow kind of a similar formula, but I don't think they necessarily need to be as expensive of apartments as the New York ones, although they are clearly pretty nice apartments. They just don't need to be thousands of dollars. But that's not to say that they aren't sometimes. They do have a certain amount of wealth associated with them, or it seems anyways. Sometimes and I guess this is maybe where they're different. Sometimes when I see these ones, I always wonder if they're living in bumfuck Ohio, where they're able to afford these apartments, especially when they're young, what they're doing or what they come from, I guess, to afford these apartments. But that's a personal problem. Now, I just wanted to say, I do not have one of these apartments. However, I love my apartment. I feel very privileged to have my apartment. It's a very cliche Boston apartment, though. I have a radiator that whistles. When you go into the bathroom, the door hits the toilet. Okay, so, and my kitchen's really small, too. There's not enough countertop in this apartment. But I'm, so lucky to live here. And I don't want to come off I'm complaining or anything, because I feel so privileged to live here. In college, I shared a room with one other person up until senior year, and I lived with 5 roommates including me, for 2 of my years. But that's also part of the reason why I wanted to bring this up. It's because living alone truly has changed the trajectory of my life. I know it's an overused thing that's kind of said on the internet,
oh, it changed my brain chemistry.
But it actually has, I think, made me a different person. There's something so special about having your own space. Do you see where we're going with this? Now I want to get more specific into what I mean by the privilege of having your own space. I don't necessarily even mean the privilege of having these super fancy things like these New York apartments, or having the nicest things or the cleanest space, but I'm more referring to the mental space that comes with having these things or having like your own space in general that's not being shared with other people. Hi everyone, I'm jumping on podcast style because I just lost the plot and never followed up on my thoughts on the like New York apartments clean reset like aesthetic, I guess. I don't know how I didn't, but I apologize. So I just wanted to follow up really quick and like actually explain my thoughts on it. So the whole point I was trying to get at was having extra space, meaning like more than a bedroom to call your own, how that can like affect you mentally, particularly is like young people in like their 20s or their 30s. It's kind of like a time in your life when you often do live alone. So I just want to say like this maybe doesn't apply as much to like, you know, people who have been married for a long time or people who have kids, but more like in your 20s when you're like figuring things out, I guess. But anyways, let's just say that I think there's this extreme benefit in a mental way and like how you perceive the world and how you exist in having these like crazy expensive apartments in New York, or even in having like an extra room like your living room. And particularly what I was like trying to get at with the New York apartments and the reset vlogs is the benefit of having clean space for you to expand. So as an example, say you're in your room doing homework and you're in college or something and you have 4 roommates. So if you go into the living room, you're having to like interact with people. So that's like going to take a little bit of mental ability or like mental capacity. Or if you're living with these people, you're having noise coming from all over the place. Like noise is such a important aspect of this because it's like almost impossible to escape the noise when you're living with this many people. So I was really just trying to highlight how freeing or how different, I guess, it can be to have these amazingly clean apartments. And obviously there's a huge aspect of this which comes from like you need to have money to have these apartments, and obviously there's a lot of other like mental relief that comes with having money. So I realize that's a factor that's going to play into this, but I more just really wanted to talk about how having space to spread out is revolutionary. It is groundbreaking for your existence to have one clean space. So having the time, the money, the ability to have a clean space to exist in that is your own and not being disrupted by others. Having the mental understanding that this space is yours, it's for you only, and you kind of define who gets brought into it is totally game changing than sharing space with siblings, your family, other people, other roommates. It's totally different. So that was the point I was trying to make, and my brain is so smooth right now and I never got to it. So I hope that this was an okay way of rectifying that mistake. Thank you. Ciao, Bella. So it's December when I'm making this video, which means it's Vlogmas. If you're unfamiliar with the concept, the idea of Vlogmas, it's a popular thing on YouTube that's been going on for a while. I think it was created by Ingrid Nilsson. And so what it is people who vlog post a vlog every single day of December leading up to Christmas. The reason I'm bringing this up, I swear it's connected to the video, is I've been watching Steph Bohr's Vlogmas. It's one of the only Vlogmases I'm watching this year, actually. In one of her videos, she talks about how she feels having her own living room for the first time, because previously she had lived in like a studio apartment when she was like in college. So this is like her first time living in one bedroom, basically. But anyways, in her video, she talks about how freeing, I guess, it feels to have like this extra space that is your living room. In my apartment, for example, I spend about 75% of my time, like my total time in this apartment, in my living room. I should say my waking time. I guess I'm not including sleeping. In every other living situation I had before this includes like growing up, anything like before this, I spent a lot of my time, particularly my alone time, in my bedroom. Sorry, I gotta adjust. My leg is in fact falling asleep, so I may have just gotten an inch shorter. This is to say there's a notable life improvement or like quality of life improvement that comes with having an extra room in your living space that you can take up and that you don't need to share with other people, so that you can exist in more than like one fucking box and it's still your space and you can still feel very like non-perceived, like you're not being perceived and you can do whatever you want in the space. I think that privilege like makes me emotional. It is actually insane how different you feel when you have an amount of space that is purely your own. This isn't a side topic I've decided to discuss in this video because like I don't want to make it super long, but this is one that I'm interested in, and that is jobs that confine you to living in specific locations. So what I mean by this is like, for example, teachers who are living in certain areas because they're teaching in certain school districts. or like people who work in academia. So they have, like, if they want to go to better universities or study at better universities, they have to live in the cities that those universities exist in. Or maybe you only got accepted to certain schools. Like med school is an example of this. It's really fucking hard to get into med school. So you're like, if you're getting in, there's a strong chance you're getting into like 1 or 2. So you have to go where that med school is. These careers are confined to very specific locations. Like for example, so I work in academia, but I live in Boston because that's where the university I work at is located. But I live like farther from my place of work because like the farther out I lived, the cheaper rent is. So in Boston, it's obviously a very popular research area. There's a lot of good universities in Boston. So a lot of people I know who are working in research live with roommates. So that means a lot of people who are like more educated than me are living with roommates still. And it's just like kind of a crazy concept to think about, like being in your 30s and living with roommates is maybe something not a lot of people are interested in doing. But if you want to work in education and you don't want to live too far out, it's kind of not a choice, I guess. So the other section of this video I wanted to talk about is the lack of third spaces. Part of the section was actually inspired by the class I'm taking, the one that I told you about that I have a very big paper and a very big project due for. It is an environmental law and policy class. Last week we talked about land management, so it's like how land is used, I guess, and how it's delegated. So that like kind of has more to do with like HOAs and like the use of farmland and stuff like that. But it did get me thinking about third spaces and alone time. You may have seen some things online about third spaces lately. I know I've seen a few things, but if you don't know, like the definition of a third space is third spaces are locations that facilitate social interaction outside of the people you live or work with and encourage public relaxation. I've seen some discussion lately on the lack of third spaces, or particularly how free third spaces are disappearing, where a lot of them you have to have a certain amount of money or the ability to pay at a consistent rate in order to access third spaces. Coffee shops are another really popular example, but even at coffee shops these days, people are usually like doing homework or they're on their computer. Also, coffee shops are not free. Parks are disappearing to land development, and a large deterrent was the pandemic. You know, everyone was staying home for a portion of time, so that really eliminated the need for third spaces or even like the access to third spaces. So I think that also led to like a major decline in third space usage even after the pandemic. So lack of third spaces means that people are spending more time at home. So if you have roommates, you're spending time with your roommates, or if you're like still like growing up, you're spending time with your family. That's not to say that spending time with your family is a burden. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's different than living alone or having like an amount of space to yourself. I guess this is like off the dome too, but it's a very common trope too, where even kids, when they have their own like bedroom, it's such a trope for parents to invade that space, like, and not in like a negative way or not in an intentionally negative way, where they'll just like go into their kid's room. And it's like, I'm really not trying to say that this is like a bad thing that parents do, but it is something where it like kind of makes your room not necessarily always feel like it's yours, because anyone can enter it when you're sharing it with people. So when there isn't third spaces, or you're not actively pursuing third spaces, there's living with people, and then there's going to work, where like most places, I think you're working with I'm gonna say careers. I've been watching the Hunger Games lately, so I guess it's on the mind, where you're working with coworkers or like your supervisors. When I'm at work, I sit really close to my supervisor, and there's like a few other people who sit near me, so I never really feel like I am not being perceived at work. Like, it's a lot of time being perceived, I think, and so I like never really feel completely off at work. You know, I feel like I'm always under the impression that someone could be watching me. That sounds really, I need to be in witness protection program or something like that. I think if you work in a workspace, you maybe know what I mean. I don't know. The whole point of this was to say, if you are not accessing these third spaces, where and when are you feeling like you can relax, or are you feeling relaxed? So this is slightly the moral section of my video, where I'm just going to say I really recommend looking for a third space. It's not like the easiest thing, you know, and also like putting yourself out there and entering new places is like really scary. Trust me, I do get that, but it's so worth it, I think. For me, I just joined a book club, and I was like kind of nervous about it, but I was able to like take a friend with me who was willing to come, and I had a really, really good time. It was like awesome. So I'm like planning on attending book club a bit more. So that was like a really fun third space for me. I also recently picked up my like physical library card. I had the digital one so I can access like Libby and stuff like that. But I recently went to my branch of the Boston Public Library and I picked up my card. So now I spend time at my library, and I know I've heard really great things about the main Boston Public Library branch. Guys, it's fully 1:45 right now, so I don't know why it's the start. As I was saying, so I have spent time at my local library. That's a good one, and that one is also a free one for most people. I think library cards are free in most places, and also it's fun. Reading's fun, guys. Read. And I also think that's like a really good example of a third space where you can like find your own space, because it's a good one where like you can be quiet and like it's a good time to like be alone. And some libraries have like study spaces or things like that, so you can even like close yourself off a little bit. We had this thing at my college where we call them the cages, like everyone called them the cages, but where you could like literally lock yourself into this like tiny little room, and so like people weren't like looking in at you. You could feel really like alone, I guess. You're not feeling like people are looking at you. So cages were actually great. So guys, get yourself a cage. I also want to, this is like very on brand for the beginning of the section, but I also want to talk about the privilege of third spaces, because you obviously have to live in a place or have the access to get to third spaces. For example, growing up, I lived in a really rural area, so the only way you could really get anywhere is by driving. So you have to be able to either have someone who can drive you if you don't have your license, or you have to have your license. So you have and on top of having your license, you have to have a car, and having a car, you have to have money for gas. So I understand that like not everyone's going to have the ability to access third spaces because it takes money. Living in cities, in urban areas, obviously give you better access to third spaces, but like anything other than walking, you have to pay for, obviously. So it's not an easy feat accessing third spaces, which is an issue, I think, particularly in the US too. I think a lot of European countries, correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody is watching this from like a European country, from my understanding that like Europe is like much more walkable, just from my experience of the areas I've been to in Europe. Please don't come for me. I'm very bad at geography. But back to the land management part. Maybe I should just submit this for my final project. Do you think my professor would like that? City planning can really affect access to third space. So if your city is structured in a way that like doesn't allow residents access to feasible third spaces easily, that's like an issue. So that's kind of something that's up to the government, but hopefully they're building cities in a way that's accessible for large groups of people to access things that improve your life. Crazy concept, I know. So also in Boston, like I don't have a car, and I haven't driven regularly in a while since living in cities, basically. A lot of people in Boston don't have cars because there's no parking. And if you want to pay for parking, you're gonna have to like sell your liver, and you're gonna need your liver to afford parking in Boston, okay? So like, inaccessibility is a nightmare, dude. Just a nightmare. One of the alone spaces I do truly miss, though, is my car. Like, there's something so special about being able to drive by yourself, like whether that be listening to the music choices or like the podcast choices or nothing that you want to listen to, and being able to like sing by yourself. And it's also like a great amount of dedicated quiet time, where I think a lot of us are like, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. Like being on your phone, I think really does change how you perceive the world. I know, crazy. Yeah, so having that dedicated alone time, like my commute when I was in high school was like 15 minutes. And that was like, half an hour minimum a day of just like getting to sit with my thoughts, which I think is also really beneficial in the mornings. So that's like a third space that I really miss. So anyways, that's kind of everything I wanted to discuss today. But I hope I've like gotten my point across, where it's just like how much of a privileged space is in general. Like how, if you live alone, if you have an inch of extra space, like if you have a living room, or like if you live in a 1-bedroom, or you've had the privilege of living alone at all, I think that is like such, like it totally changes you, I think. Yeah, that's just what I've been thinking about lately. It's just like how fortunate a lot of us are to have extra space, and how that's not accessible to a large amount of the population. So I don't know, this was kind of was like a little bit all over the place, but that's just like how my thoughts have been lately. So it's something I wanted to discuss. So please, if anyone else has any thoughts on this or any contradictions, I'm totally open to that too, if it's done in a nice way. Thank you for watching. I don't know what to do about this darkness. It's maybe an omen of some sort, but I hope not. Thank you for watching, and subscribe if you're interested in more video essays. This is probably going to be my last video of the year, so I will see you in 2022. 2024. Okay, I hope everyone has a good Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever you're celebrating, and everyone has a good New Year. And I hope everyone eats some good food or sees their family or catches Santa Claus. I don't know, whatever you want. I love you. Peace, love, and happiness. Mwah, 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 mwah. And I'll see you in the next one. Ciao, Bella. Goodbye.